very quickly show you a sketch that I drew, and it's from a photograph of the mudflats on the Exe estuary down in Devon. Very simple sketch, but I'm going to work from this, and I've transferred it to a 12 by 16 block of Meaden watercolour paper. Now it's just bringing a little bit of water over the surface of the whole sheet, and I'm going to show you a 3-step method for painting, working from light to dark, and you can't really go wrong with this method. Now before I get going, I'll just show you the brushes I'm going to use. Now Meaden sent me these as well, so they're professional range of mop brushes. They're all synthetic, but there's different sizes ranging from the large 9 all the way down to the small number 1. Now it's the first time I've used these brushes, so I'm going to test them out in this video and we'll see how we get on with these. So I'm going to bring in a wash over the whole sheet, and it's going to be the lighter tone, so starting with the sky. Now there's not a lot of sky in this one, so I can treat it very simply with a little bit of cobalt blue and some raw sienna. I'll post the reference photo that I drew the sketch from. I'll post that on Patreon and also in a members only post over on YouTube. So bringing in the sky, quite a lot of water. I want this first wash to be fairly dilute. So using the large mop, they don't hold as much paint and water as a natural hair, something like a squirrel or a goat hair brush. But they're quite nice, very soft bristles. Especially if you're looking for an introduction to mop brushes, then this is probably quite a good starting point. If you don't want the layout of quite a lot of money for natural hair, then you can't really go too far wrong with something like this. They're relatively inexpensive. I'll post a link to the Meaden website as well in the description of this video, and there'll be a discount code as well, so you can get a little bit of money off. So continuing this wash down, making it slightly bluer as I come across the surface of the river, but still very light, very dilute. And I'm going to have a little bit of light coming in across the water as well, left of centre slightly, so I don't really need to put any paint in that area at all. And I can continue this wash down all across where there's going to be some wet sand, little mud flats. Now I can start allowing some of this paint to break up ever so slightly, getting a little bit of dry brush texture in there. As I introduce a little bit more raw sienna, I'm going to lay some of that into the water again. Can work back into it while it's still wet. I'm still using the largest size brush, size 9. Let's touch a little bit of ultramarine in there. Now dragging that in across the surface, I can allow little areas to break up now. And again touch a little bit of that slightly darker paint in to the surface of the river. Getting little bits of dry brush happening. That seems to be happening quite easily with these brushes. I suppose because they don't hold as much water as something made from natural hair. It's very easy to get that dry brush. So modifying that mixture again now, a little bit more ultramarine. Let's get a little bit of light red into this mixture now. So working my way down, I can get slightly darker as I come down towards the foreground. And again, allowing that paint to break up. I try and get the impression of the light shining across the surface of the water and the wet sandy mud. And so there's a little stream that runs around, just a little channel in that mud there, and I can bring that all in the same wash. I don't need to worry about cutting around any of the edges at this stage, but just making sure I leave that little bit of light coming down, little broken areas of the white of the paper left behind. So let's get a little bit darker with that mixture, a bit more ultramarine. There's some green, grey paint left in my palette as well. I can mix that in. So building up a sense of the perspective within this first wash, even though it's very light. Still thinking about distance. So getting a tiny little bit darker still as I come down, right down into the foreground. And again allowing the little areas of white to remain. Let's get some more ultramarine, a bit more light red. So modify that mixture again, a little bit redder now. So I'm coming all the way down into the foreground. I've pretty much covered the whole sheet. But already building up a sense of light and dark and a suggestion of distance. Let's get a bit of raw sienna into that mixture as well. Lay some of that in while it's wet and then bring that wash, continue it down. Quite a nice wet sand colour. Now this channel is very shallow as it makes its way round towards the river. So I can cover it all up in the same colours. And it'll all start coming to life once I get the darks in a little bit later in the third stage. So I brought a wash over the whole sheet. I'm just laying a little bit more of that raw sienna mixture just around the edge of these little sandbanks. Lightest touch, just dropping a little bit of paint in there, suggesting some of the shape, some of the form. Now I need it to be a little bit drier before I add the distance. Now I've waited really only about 2 minutes just for the sheen to go off the paper, and I'm going to swap to a size 3, and I'm going to suggest that some of the distance now. So I've got some cobalt and some light red. And it's slightly damp still, the paper, but not sopping wet. So this paint's going to hold its own shape, but it should still soften a tiny little bit on its own. So I'm looking at that distant hill over there, covered in trees. And I can suggest it all in one big shape, but modifying the mixture all the time. Not too much, I don't need a huge variety of change in the colour, but just a little bit, make it more interesting. So a bit more cobalt, a little bit more light red. And so building up this shape fairly slowly, working my way across, mixing little areas on the paper as well, a little bit more cobalt, continue that shape out, and there's lots of trees and there are a few little buildings and things poking up just above that tree line, but I can suggest it all. I don't need to really look at it too closely. There's a little building there, might be a church or something off in the distance, but again it's not really important. It's about suggesting that shape and just getting an impression that there's a lot of things going on in the distance without really painting anything. So I've got a little bit of ultramarine, it's French ultramarine, and light red, and so continuing that shape all the way across, all joined together. A bit more ultra, a bit more cobalt. Taking a little bit of care to make sure this shape is level on the horizon as well. I don't want it running up or downhill, it's off in the distance. So modify again, tiny little bit more light red. Now bring that shape all the way across. Now while it's still a little bit wet, there's some slightly darker shapes in front of that tree line, and I can suggest that as simply as possible with some ultramarine, a little bit of light red again, so slightly darker blue grey, and lay that in while it's wet. It gives a little bit of shape and form to that area without really doing too much. Don't need any detail, it's way off in the distance. So laying in that darker paint very simply while it's all wet, and it will mix on the paper. Again, modify it, a bit more red, a bit more ultramarine. Make it slightly darker towards the bottom. Continue it all the way across pretty much. And I don't really need to do any more in this first stage, so I'm going to allow this to fully dry. Okay, moving on to the second stage, I can start introducing some slightly darker paint. So I'll bring in some water with a mist bottle, and I can start laying in the mid-tones. So let's pick up a size 4. And I can use pretty much all the same colours as I used in the first stage, but just make them slightly darker. So I've got ultramarine, cobalt, light red, raw sienna. And now I can start building up a little bit of structure across these mud flats. I don't really want to be painting any detail. I'm looking into the light in this scene, and so your vision is slightly blurred, and so detail can be kept at a minimum. So light red, raw sienna, mixed in with everything in the palette. And I can get quite a lot of dry brush texture in this stage. Really try and give the impression of there's a lot of light shining across the surface, catching all those little areas of water. Now, one thing I'm noticing with these brushes is that dry brush is extremely easy to achieve. So I've got a little bit of blue into that mixture, dragging that across. Let's get a tiny little suggestion of some activity on the surface of the river. Not much, very, very light touch. Dragging in a tiny little bit of blue paint, blue-grey paint. A little bit more light red into that mixture. And it's a tiny bit darker on this right hand side. I need to make sure I don't cover up everything from my first wash. Let's swap to a slightly larger brush. So more light red, more cobalt blue. Mix that up, fairly grey. Let's touch a bit more raw sienna in there, more light red. And so really just building up lots of areas, lots of variation in the colour, working my way across the whole sheet all the time as well, looking where I can lay some of that mixture in and then going back and modifying it. So more French Ultra and light red. Getting progressively darker as I come down towards the foreground, and now starting to outline the shape of this little channel that cuts around, that curves around the bend. Let's give everything a tiny little spritz as well. Not much at all. Lightest little spray there with the mist bottle. Now again, tiny bit darker on this right hand side, so I can suggest that very simply. And now there's lots of little ripples and bits of mud and stones and all kinds of things going around in that little creek there. And I can suggest all of that with a couple of swipes with the brush, allowing that dry brush texture to happen. Now again, slightly outlining the shape of that little channel there, and now bringing this wash down. So more French Ultra and light red. Let's mix that up. It's about as dark as I'm going to go in this second stage. And I'll save all my darkest darks for the third and final stage, and that's when everything will start to come together. Dragging in across that surface, allowing all those little bits of paint to break up. You can really suggest thousands of little things happening without having to do too much. I think that's the joy of dry brush technique. Let's lay some of this darker paint in and around as well, while everything's slightly wet, joining everything together. And really quite bold now down in the foreground. And now I'm really getting that sense of perspective, aerial perspective and distance. And now I think I need to dry this stage off before I move on to the final stage. Okay, now it's time to really bring in some darks, some boats across the water, and some really strong dark down in that foreground. So I'm going to swap back to a smaller brush. Let's mix up some really strong dark paint. Now I haven't used any burnt sienna at all in this painting. I'm going to stick with that. I don't want to start introducing another pigment at this stage. So I'll mix all my darks, I think, with blue and red and raw sienna. Now bring in a little bit of water so I can get some soft edges, and then this dark structure that goes across, comes in just over halfway, and then works all the way over to this right hand side. It's like a harbour wall or something over there. So I can bring that all the way across. That creates a nice little bit of separation as well between the distance and the river. And I can suggest that really simply as that with one little line. So let's modify this dark mixture again. More ultramarine light red. And there's loads of little boats and little things on the water And I don't need to get caught up in trying to paint that too accurately at all, and I think a few marks with the brush is enough. I can start suggesting some little areas across the river, tying that in now to these mud flats, and really pulling everything together with these few bits of dark. So more French Ultra, light red, just get a bit of raw sienna into that mixture as well. Now your darks don't always have to be black or Payne's grey. You can mix them with blues and reds. Raw sienna makes a really nice natural looking dark without being too black or too insistent. And now let's outline the edge of this little channel, start introducing some suggestions of stones and real strong shadow areas across the surface of this land. Now I can start picking out the edge of the little bank as it runs round the bend there. Modify that mixture again. I don't like to add all my darks in the same, it can look flat, so always go back, change the mixture slightly. Now there's a post on this right hand side, I can put that in. It's quite a nice little compositional tool as well, a post next to water. It's always a good thing to be able to have an excuse to reflect something down into the water. It makes it look a little bit wetter. Let's just soften that. That went on a little bit too dark. So clean, damp brush there, just to lift out a tiny little bit of paint. Let's give that little blot as well, a bit of paper towel. And now there's some boats. And again, little mark with the brush is enough to suggest all of those. Don't need any detail at all. And the same with the mast. Just one little mark is enough of that. There's no reflection, they're in the distance and it's moving, flowing water, so I don't need a reflection. Now let's continue bringing some dark shapes in across these banks. Just try and create the curve as it goes round the bend there. Now some slightly lighter grey paint, let's add that reflection from that post. I can treat that extremely simply as well, and let's just knock that back with my finger. And that's enough to suggest that. Now there's some more boats and all kinds of things up there in the river. Too far away to work out what they are, so again, little marks with the brush. Essentially just a little horizontal mark and then some verticals for the masts, and bring some of them up above the tree line and have some of them below as well. So connecting the water and the land in with the sky, joining everything together. Let's get some more ultramarine, light red, raw sienna, and continue now some of these shapes across these mud flats. Now I'm not really doing much at all, allowing the brush to make its marks, getting that dry brush sparkle happening, and then leaving it well alone. Don't need to really overdo it. Now let's mix the dark with light red, cobalt this time. And there's a few more little posts. Tiny little mark with the brush and then join it in to the land. And again, gives me an excuse to reflect something else in the water. Tiny little wavy line, and then soften it with my finger. Now let's swap back to a size 4. And I could possibly leave the painting here, but I think I'll try and really push that sense of distance by bringing in some stronger dark down in the foreground. So mix it up, really quite bold, very dark. And it's always the strong darks I find really make the light stand out a lot more, especially in a painting like this where you're looking into the sun. It's quite a good idea, I think, to really push the darks and builds up that sense of contre-jour. But again, still allowing the brush to do its thing. And getting lots of little sparkly areas. Let's drag some of that across the surface of the water as well. Like I said, it's very shallow there, so you can see the bed underneath. You can see the wet sand. Let's go even stronger now with these darks. It's really quite dark down in the foreground on this right hand side. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to overdo any kind of detail, but just using some dark shapes to really bring that foreground in close, push that distance away. So modifying that mixture again, same 3 colours. Lots of real sparkly areas in there, pushing that sense of light. Now I think we're almost there. Let's just go back into the smaller brush, mix up a little bit more dark paint. Again, really strong, really dark, about as dark as I can go. Let's just strengthen the edge, some of the water, a few little smaller marks to suggest some little stones. Little broken edges, little lost and found areas. Outline the edge of that creek running around the bend there as well. Really try and make the most of that curve. It's a really nice lead-in feature, so I want to make the most of that. Let's just introduce a tiny little bit more dark paint on this post there. Not too much. Let's just grab a little bit more cobalt. I think we're almost there, but let's just slightly darken the surface of the river on the left and on the right hand side, and try and push the eye more in to that light area that I've got running all the way down the painting. Don't need too much, tiniest little bit just to darken left and right. And let's knock back a couple of these little areas in the foreground, and I think we'll call that finished. Okay, that's the painting done. A quick study from a reference photo that I made a sketch from, and then using these new brushes I've never used before, Meaden Professional mop brushes, synthetic brushes, but I quite enjoyed using them, quite enjoyed testing them out. Different to what I would usually use. I more often than not will use a natural hairbrush, but I really like the ability to achieve the dry brush texture especially. And if you're looking for an introduction to this style of brush, then I don't think you can go too far wrong with these at that price point. And like I said, there's a link and a discount code in the description of the video, so you can check that out if you want to have a look at those brushes. Anyway, I hope you liked the demo. If you did, let me know. If you've got any questions or any of that kind of thing, let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody.